Sure. Here's section 1 of your script, around 700 words, written for a faceless YouTube video with natural flow, short sentences, and strong engagement. It started like most of these stories do. A quiet neighborhood. Nothing fancy. Just regular people living their lives, mowing their lawns, planting their flowers, waving at each other from across the street. That's the kind of place I've lived in for over 15 years. It wasn't perfect, but it was home. My neighbors were good people. We all kept to ourselves, but we helped each other out when needed. We had barbecues in the summer, snowball fights in the winter, and everything in between. Life was good. Then came Karen. Not her real name, obviously. But if you've ever met a real Karen, you'll know exactly what I mean. She bought the house at the end of the street. Big corner lot. Huge SUV. Loud voice. Always watching. The kind of person who acts like she owns everything the moment she moves in. Within a month, she had applied to be the president of our small, quiet HOA. Nobody else really wanted the job, so she got it by default. We didn't know what was coming. At first, it was little things. Notices on doors about weeds. Sidewalk chalk being labeled as vandalism. She tried to ban holiday decorations after someone put up a Halloween display she didn't like. Some of us laughed it off. Others got annoyed. But nobody really pushed back. She had a clipboard, a fancy printer, and way too much time on her hands. I stayed out of it. I kept my yard neat, my driveway clean, and my fence freshly painted. Nothing to worry about, right? I thought if I just stayed under the radar, she'd leave me alone. I was wrong. See, behind my house, I've got this garden. Nothing huge. Just a peaceful little space I've been working on for years. Tomatoes, peppers, herbs, even a couple of fruit trees. There's a small wooden fence around it. Nothing crazy. Just something to keep the rabbits out and the soil in. I built it myself. No one had ever complained about it. Not once. Until Karen walked by. I was outside watering the plants when I saw her stop on the sidewalk. She tilted her head like something smelled bad. I said hello. She didn't respond. Just stood there, staring at the fence like it had personally insulted her. Then she pulled out her phone, snapped a photo, and walked away without saying a word. The next day, there was a notice taped to my door. Unauthorized structure detected on property. HOA code violation. Section 4B. I actually laughed when I read it. It sounded like something out of a sci-fi movie. But it wasn't a joke. She wanted me to take down my garden fence. Said it hadn't been approved by the HOA. Now, like I said, I've lived here a long time. That fence has been standing for over a decade. It was there before Karen even moved into the state, let alone the neighborhood. I figured this was just a misunderstanding. So I tried to talk to her. That didn't go well. She didn't want to hear it. She just kept repeating, rules are rules, like a broken record. She had this smug little smile, like she was enjoying it. Like she was waiting for me to argue so she could escalate things. I told her the fence wasn't bothering anyone and had been there for years. Her response? Well, it bothers me star. That was her whole argument. I tried to bring it up at the next HOA meeting, but surprise, Karen had changed the meeting schedule and forgot to notify the rest of us. Only 3 people showed up, and they were the ones who didn't want to get involved. It was becoming clear, she wasn't just being difficult. She was building a case. Against me. Over a fence. I went home frustrated. I didn't want drama. I just wanted to grow my vegetables in peace. But something told me this wasn't over. And sure enough, a week later, I got another notice. This one was different. It wasn't just a warning. It was a plan. According to the document, the HOA had approved a landscaping correction to bring the property in line with community standards. Translation. Karen wanted to bulldoze my garden. And she had actually scheduled it. She was serious. And that's when I picked up the phone and called my brother. Not many people in the neighborhood knew it, but my older brother happens to be a state senator. He doesn't throw his weight around. Never has. But that night, When I explained what was happening, I could hear the tone in his voice shift. Calm. Focused. He said, "Don't worry. She's messing with the wrong guy." And that's when everything started to change. Of course. Here's section 2 of your faceless YouTube script, around 700 words, continuing smoothly from where section 1 left off. It keeps the tone natural, the sentence is short, and maintains viewer engagement throughout. My brother didn't waste time. Within hours, he had already contacted a few people, city officials, zoning inspectors, even someone at the Department of Neighborhood Affairs. He asked me to send photos of the garden, the fence, and every single document Karen had left on my door. I forwarded it all. He looked through everything carefully and called me back the same evening. "This isn't just wrong," he said. "It's illegal." Karen had crossed several lines. She was acting like the HOA had power to remove private property without consent or city approval. That's not how it works. Even if the fence was truly a violation, there's a process: warning, hearings, review. She skipped all of that. No one voted. No one approved it. This wasn't HOA business. It was just Karen, drunk on power. The next morning, I woke up to find orange flags marking the edge of my garden. Bright little plastic markers sticking out of the soil, outlining where they planned to dig. I didn't put them there. Neither did the city. It was Karen, or someone she hired. That's when I knew she meant to follow through. But she wasn't prepared for what happened next. My brother filed an official cease and desist letter with the HOA, citing specific property and zoning laws she had violated. He copied it to the city council, the mayor's office, and the county legal department. Karen got served that same day. And let me tell you, she did not take it well. A neighbor told me she was seen pacing up and down her front lawn, screaming into her phone. She tried to get the landscaper to come anyway, but after receiving a legal notice, they pulled out fast. No contractor wants to be caught in a property rights violation, especially not with a senator involved. But Karen wasn't done. She came to my house that evening. Knocked like she was the sheriff. I opened the door and she launched into this angry, rehearsed speech. She said I had no right to go outside the HOA, and that I was threatening her authority. She accused me of creating conflict where there was none. I didn't argue. I simply told her the fence wasn't coming down. The bulldozer wasn't coming either. And that she should speak with my attorney from now on. Her face went red. I could see the steam coming out of her ears. She stammered something about fines and penalties, then turned and walked away without finishing her sentence. It would have been funny if it wasn't so ridiculous. A few days later, she tried something new. She started spreading rumors. She told neighbors I was using my political connections to intimidate her. Said I was trying to tear down the HOA. Claimed I was building illegal structures and hiding behind my brother's name. She really thought people would believe her. But she miscalculated. Because while Karen had been busy writing angry notices and handing out citations like candy, I had been quietly building something else: goodwill. Over the years, I'd helped shovel driveways during snowstorms, fixed broken mailboxes, and even babysat for one of the single moms down the block. People knew me. They trusted me. They didn't buy Karen's story. One by one, neighbors started talking. Not loudly. Not publicly. But the conversation was happening. The woman across the street told me she'd gotten a notice about her flower pots being out of regulation. A young couple got cited for parking their car slightly over the sidewalk, even though it had never been an issue before. Everyone had a Karen story. And finally, they were starting to connect the dots. Meanwhile, my brother wasn't done either. He filed an official complaint with the state's HOA Regulation Board. Turns out, Karen had never filed her leadership with the board at all. She had taken over the HOA without following the proper procedure. Her position wasn't even legitimate. The board launched an investigation. And that's when things really started unraveling. Karen tried to push back. She sent more letters. Threatened more action. But it was all smoke. Everyone could see it now. What she'd been doing wasn't about the rules. It was about control. And once that illusion started to crack, There was no fixing it. Even the people who used to stay out of things were starting to get involved. It wasn't just about my fence anymore. It was about the whole neighborhood. Absolutely. Here's section 3 of your faceless YouTube narration script, continuing seamlessly from section 2. It keeps the viewer engaged with natural pacing, simple vocabulary, and a growing sense of tension. A week later, everything felt tense. People were watching their backs, keeping their heads down, but the silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was the kind of silence you get before a storm. Karen had stopped walking the neighborhood with her clipboard, but her presence was still everywhere. In the letters. In the rules she posted online. In the fake fines she kept trying to issue for things like garden gnomes and porch chairs. But this time, the silence wasn't working in her favor. More and more neighbors started to compare notes. I wasn't the only one getting harassed. One guy down the street had his trash bins reported for being out too early. Karen actually took photos and filed a complaint with the city waste office. Another woman told me she had gotten a citation for painting her mailbox without prior design approval. It was black. Just plain black. Karen's pattern was clear now: target, control, isolate. And when that didn't work, she'd double down and try to intimidate. That's when something strange happened. I found another notice taped to my door, but this one wasn't from the HOA. It was from the city. It said a complaint had been filed against *me* for illegal gardening, excessive water usage, and unauthorized fencing near public property. None of it was true, of course. The water usage claim alone was ridiculous. I used drip irrigation, one of the most water-efficient systems you can install. Still, the city had to follow up, so they sent out an inspector. I showed him around, explained everything, and handed him a file with photos, permits, and a timeline of the entire situation. The inspector barely said a word. He just nodded and took notes. As he was leaving, he turned and said, "Yeah, this isn't the first time I've seen complaints like this from that HA. Something tells me we'll be back here for a different reason soon." I knew what he meant. What I didn't know was how fast things would unravel after that. Turns out, Karen had filed over a dozen complaints in a span of 3 weeks. All of them targeting different neighbors. Most were dismissed immediately for lack of evidence. But that many reports in such a short time? It raised flags. City officials started looking into her personally. And what they found wasn't pretty. She'd submitted false information. Faked her title. Signed documents without board consent. In one case, she even forged an email from a supposed resident complaint that turned out to be traced back to her own account. Now she wasn't just dealing with angry neighbors. She was under formal review. Word spread fast. And suddenly, people who'd been afraid to speak up finally found their voice. It started with a neighborhood group chat. Someone made it and added everyone on the block, except Karen. People started posting their own experiences, screenshots, letters, everything. It was like opening a floodgate. The stories came pouring in, one after the other. People laughed, got mad, shared tips. For the first time in a long time, it felt like we were all on the same team again. That same week, someone suggested holding a community meeting. Not an HOA meeting. Just a gathering in the park for everyone who felt like something needed to change. At first, I wasn't sure how many would show up. Maybe 10. 15. We had over 40 people there. Some brought lawn chairs. Others brought drinks and snacks. Kids were running around. It looked more like a block party than a meeting, but the energy was different. People were ready to stand up, not just for themselves, but for each other. Nobody wanted to live in fear of getting fined over a potted plant or the wrong color doormat. That's when a quiet older man, Mr. Jensen, who lived near the cul-de-sac, stood up. He'd been there longer than anyone else. Barely ever said a word. But this time, he had something to say. "I've lived here for 35 years, he said. And I've never seen someone cause this much trouble in such a short time. If we want things to change, we can't wait for someone else to fix it. We have to do it ourselves." Everyone clapped. That night, people started organizing for a formal vote to remove Karen from her position. They were tired of her lies. Tired of being bullied. And more importantly, they realized that together, they had the power to do something about it. Karen still didn't see it coming. Sure. Here's section 4 of your faceless YouTube video script, approximately 700 words, continuing the story with a natural flow that keeps viewers engaged and curious for what comes next, without wrapping up or concluding. When Karen noticed the shift, it was already too late. She must have sensed something was off. The usual head nods and polite smiles she expected from neighbors had disappeared. Now, people avoided her. Sidewalks that once cleared for her were filled with quiet conversations she wasn't a part of. The power she thought she held was slipping, and fast. But instead of stepping back, she did what entitled people often do when challenged. She went on the offensive. She started patrolling the neighborhood. Not just in her usual HOA president role, but now as a self-declared enforcer. She walked around with a measuring tape, a clipboard, and even a camera. She took photos of people's driveways, fences, plants, cars. And she made sure they knew it. She'd stare you down while taking the picture, as if daring you to say something. She even started calling the police for the smallest things. One neighbor had a backyard barbecue, and Karen reported it as a fire hazard. Another family got the cops called on them for having more than 3 cars parked near their house during a birthday party. But perhaps the most absurd incident was when she tried to report a lemonade stand for unlicensed business activity. It was run by 2 kids under the age of 10. The police didn't take her seriously, of course. In fact, some of the officers already knew her by name. One of them told the dad of the lemonade stand kids, "We've had 5 calls from her this month alone." None of them made sense. But Karen didn't stop. She thought fear would win. She thought the community would fold. What she didn't realize was that every call, every false complaint, every ridiculous accusation only made the group stronger. Each person who got targeted joined the cause. It was like she was building the opposition herself, one angry neighbor at a time. Meanwhile, my brother had been gathering more paperwork. He found out Karen had never submitted HOA financial records for the past 2 years. That was a big deal. Legally, HOA boards have to disclose budgets, expenses, and dues collection. No one had seen any of that. And when he asked for them formally, Karen refused. That gave him just what he needed. He filed a complaint not just with the HOA Regulation Board, but with the State Auditor's Office. Within days, Karen received a letter demanding she provide all records or face penalties. She went quiet for a few days after that. Then came her next mistake. In a last-ditch effort to keep control, Karen sent out a newsletter to the entire neighborhood. But this wasn't your typical HOA newsletter. It was a full-blown rant. She accused residents of being ungrateful, ignorant, and even conspiratorial. She claimed the neighborhood was being taken over by troublemakers who don't respect order. It backfired, hard. People were furious. Even the few neighbors who had once supported her started speaking out. One guy said, "I supported the HOA for years, but this is embarrassing." Another woman commented, "I didn't sign up to be insulted by someone who lives 2 doors down." That week, the vote was announced. A formal special meeting would be held to remove Karen from her self-appointed position. The notice was delivered legally, and every homeowner got to vote. Karen tried to fight it, of course. She called it an illegal uprising. She said she would sue anyone who voted against her. But this time, no one was afraid. The night of the vote, people came early. Folding chairs filled the community center. Families brought their kids. Some people even wore shirts with little garden tools on them, like a nod to the backyard that had started it all. My brother stood quietly in the back, observing, saying little. Karen arrived late. She walked in like she owned the place, clipboard in hand, ready to fight. But the room didn't quiet when she entered. No one clapped. No one stood. People just stared. And then, the vote began. Each homeowner, one by one, submitted their ballot. Silent, steady, and determined. Karen sat in the front row, arms crossed, jaw clenched. She still believed she could sway the outcome. She still believed power came from fear. But she had forgotten something important. You can only push people so far before they push back harder. The ballots were in. The energy in the room shifted. You could feel it, this strange combination of tension and quiet excitement. People whispered in corners while the votes were counted. Others just stared ahead, eyes locked on the volunteers shuffling through the stack of envelopes. Karen tapped her foot the entire time. She even tried peeking over the shoulder of the person counting, pretending she had some kind of oversight authority. She didn't. Then someone spoke up. "I think it's best if you take a seat, Karen." It was Mr. Jensen again. Calm, polite, but firm. And to everyone's surprise, Karen actually listened. Maybe for the first time in months, she realized she wasn't the one in charge anymore. After what felt like an hour, but was probably only 15 minutes, the head volunteer stepped up to the front of the room. She held a paper in her hands. Everyone leaned in a little. Karen sat stiff, eyes narrowed. And then came the words. By a vote of 89-6, Karen is officially removed from her position as HOA president effective immediately. The silence was loud. And then came the sound no one expected. Cheering. Not just clapping, actual, joyful cheering. It wasn't a celebration because someone was kicked out. It was relief. Pure, overwhelming relief. You could see it in people's faces. Shoulders dropped. Smiles cracked. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in months were laughing again. Karen, on the other hand, was frozen. She sat motionless for a full 10 seconds before standing up. She didn't say a word. Just grabbed her clipboard, turned on her heel, and walked out the front door without looking back. It was over. Or so we thought. The next morning, things got weird. Somehow, overnight, a post had gone up on a local community Facebook group. It was a long rant, clearly written by Karen, where she accused the entire neighborhood of conspiring against her. She even claimed the vote was rigged and that she planned to take legal action against every single one of you for defamation and harassment. People weren't surprised, honestly. But they were done playing her game. What did surprise us, though, was how she escalated it. 2 days later, a bulldozer showed up at the edge of the neighborhood. No joke, a literal bulldozer. At first, everyone thought it was a mistake. Maybe city work. Road repairs. But then the operator got out, walked over to my brother's property line, and pulled out a rolled-up paper with what looked like a work order. Apparently, Karen had submitted a demolition request for unpermitted structures encroaching on public land. Except, my brother's structures were *fully permitted. He'd done everything by the book. Fences, landscaping, irrigation, all signed off by the city. We had copies of the documents. Still, this guy had been paid to show up and start digging. Luckily, the operator wasn't in a rush. He seemed confused too. My brother asked to see the paperwork, and as expected, it looked off. The document wasn't from the city. It was from some vague property management firm no one had heard of. And the signature. It didn't belong to anyone on the current HOA board. You already know whose name was on it. Karen had tried to fake an order and hire a private contractor to bulldoze part of his yard. She hadn't counted on the operator being a decent guy, or on the neighborhood watching. In less than 10 minutes, at least 6 people were outside, recording everything. Someone called the police. Someone else called the city. And my brother. He called someone too. His older brother. The state senator. It didn't take long before things moved quickly. The officer who arrived was calm but direct. He looked at the paperwork, looked at the bulldozer, and said, "Yeah, this isn't happening." Karen hadn't shown up to see it in person. But by the next day, she'd definitely heard what happened. Because that same morning, a letter was hand-delivered to her house. It was from the Office of Legal Affairs. Not just any city department. This one came straight from the state. It outlined several points: falsifying official documents, attempting an authorized property modification, and misuse of HOA funds. Yep, turns out, while people were digging through her actions, they'd found some questionable financial transactions too. Karen's entitled behavior wasn't just annoying anymore. It was illegal. The letter didn't just get delivered, It got noticed. The state envelope stood out in Karen's mailbox like a flare in the night sky. Everyone saw it. Neighbors whispered as they walked by. Someone even snapped a photo, and though it wasn't posted publicly, it definitely made the rounds. People were talking. But Karen. She stayed silent. She didn't answer the door. She didn't come outside. Curtains drawn, lights dim, her usually loud presence had vanished. It was strange. After all her shouting, all her threatening letters, all her HOA walkarounds, it felt almost surreal to have a quiet Karen. Of course, that didn't last long. 3 days later, she made her move. She filed a complaint against my brother. An official one, with the city. She accused him of harassment, intimidation, and inciting public rebellion. That's the actual phrase she used, public rebellion. It would have been funny if it hadn't come with real consequences. A city official had to follow up. They visited my brother's property, checked everything from fence lines to landscaping. But after a full review, the inspector actually laughed. "There's no violation here," he said, tapping the permit folder. "Everything's airtight. Whoever sent this clearly doesn't know how zoning works." Still, Karen wasn't done. She posted signs in her window. Big ones. Handwritten messages in red marker, taped to the glass. One said, "This neighborhood is under attack by liars." Another one read, "Fake permits equals fake power." People stopped taking her seriously. What was once fear had turned into ridicule. But Karen didn't know how to back down. Her entitled mindset wouldn't let her admit defeat. Then came the audit. Remember those missing HOA financial records? Well, turns out the state wasn't the only group looking into them. The new temporary board, formed after her removal, had hired a third-party accounting firm. Independent, neutral, and very thorough. They found a mess. There were payments to businesses that didn't exist. Reimbursements for supplies that were never delivered. And then there was the landscaping contract. Nearly $12,000 paid out for work that not one blade of grass could account for. Guess whose name was listed as the project coordinator? Yep, Karen's. Worse yet, several checks had been signed only by her. No second approval. No record of board meetings authorizing the expenses. That's a major HOA violation. Possibly even fraud. The new board took it straight to the legal team. But that's not what broke Karen. It wasn't the legal letters. Not the threat of civil court. Not even the possibility of charges. What finally cracked her was when the community turned completely against her, and didn't even need to raise their voices to do it. The garden project was the tipping point. You see, weeks before all this, Karen had rejected a proposal to build a community garden in one of the unused green spaces. She'd called it unnecessary, messy, and a waste of HOA funds. But now that she was out, the new board approved it unanimously. Within days, families came together. They brought shovels, soil, seeds. People who had never spoken before were laughing while planting tomatoes and herbs. Kids helped paint signs for the plots. And right there, next to the compost bin, someone planted a tiny flag that said, "Reclaimed by reason." Karen watched from her window. She must have seen them, neighbors who once nodded politely now smiling, hugging, even sharing lemonade. And they were doing it on the same patch of grass she said would ruin the view. That wasn't just a garden anymore. It was a message. And if that wasn't enough, my brother, who had mostly stayed quiet through the chaos, walked right up to the edge of her property one morning and waved. Just a wave. Not a word. Karen didn't wave back. But the next day, the signs in her windows were gone. The following week, her house went up for sale. And 2 days after that, a moving truck showed up in her driveway. People didn't cheer. They didn't jeer. They just watched as Karen's final stand quietly rolled away. Of course, the audit wasn't finished. And legal matters don't disappear just because someone moves. But for the neighborhood, something had already shifted. The fear was gone. The tension melted. All because one person stood up, followed the rules, and didn't back down when things got messy.